Hello everyone, this is part 5 of What If Naruto Escapes Konoha to Rebuild His Life, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Iruka sat with his head in his hands, surrounded by his team. Anko, Ibiki, and Kakashi looked somewhat like mummies with the number of bandages they were wearing, but weren't in any mortal danger. Tenten had only broken an arm and a leg, and Shikamaru had a slight concussion. Shizune stood next to Iruka as the only other uninjured member of the squad, while the now stable Neji lay unconscious next to her. The brown-haired hunter looked up at the people gathered around him. How could this happen? He asked quietly. How could we let this happen? Everyone, minus the still conked-out Neji, looked down at the ground. Shikamaru had taken it the hardest and hadn't spoken for hours. He felt that the whole ordeal had been his fault and refused to accept anyone's comfort. Iruka let his gaze burn into each of them and raised his voice. Mistakes were made, mistakes that should be impossible for shinobi of your caliber to make. I am still waiting for a decent explanation. Iruka was about to start openly yelling when Kakashi see him off. I ordered that no lethal force be used. Their brown-haired leader's voice suddenly dropped to a dangerously quiet tone. What? Kakashi continued on. Once you left with Shizune and Neji, I gave Anko and Ibiki an order to refrain from using lethal force, and if they made contact before I did, to make sure that I knew before anything else. Iruka's voice was still calm, but his eyes betrayed his anger. And why exactly did you do that? Because I didn't want anyone to kill Naruto before I got to see him. Even if I would have agreed, that sort of plan needs to be cleared with the mission leader. What were you going to do if someone had been killed? I figured that as Naruto has shown a reluctance to kill people who were his friends as he grew up, and as Anko and Ibiki can take care of themselves, there wouldn't be a problem. Kakashi answered, still aggravatingly composed. Turns out I was right. Iruka started to steam, but still. We planned for days, and then you decide to make a last-minute change that might be the reason Mark escaped. Kakashi gave Iruka a significant look. That was the point. Iruka took a step back. You do realize what you're implying. Kakashi turned to Shizune and smiled. Would you mind taking Neji, Shikamaru, and Tenten to the river? I think their bandages need to be changed and their wounds cleaned. Everyone noticing the extremely obvious attempt to get rid of the younger team members, they quietly left, Tenten helping carry Neji. Once they were gone, Kakashi and Iruka resumed their face-off. What you're suggesting is treason, Iruka said as he simmered. Kakashi waved his finger back and forth. No, Iruka, it is you who has failed to see underneath the underneath. Kakashi sat up. First question, Iruka, who is the most important person involved in this mission? Iruka was slightly taken aback. Obviously, the target, Naru. Wrong. Kakashi see him off. He is but a single missing nin with no vendetta against us. He just wants to be left alone, and in this he is predictable, so who then? Iruka's eyes widened. Kakashi smiled under his bandages. Very good, I see you understand. Gaara's power and influence is a very real threat to Konoha, and so his sister therefore becomes very important. Iruka was annoyed with the copy ninja's condescending tone but let it slide. I had suspicions from the moment I started my surveillance in preparation of our mission, Kakashi continued, and they were later confirmed. I only watched their interaction for a minute or two, but even then it was obvious that not only did Naruto care for and feel responsible for the girl, she cared about him. This, he continued, became even more obvious when she made an escape attempt. She wanted to go back and make sure he was okay. To be completely sure, I even asked her why she was going back to Naruto, and in this case, Kakashi held out his bandaged arms. Actions spoke louder than words. She stays with him voluntarily. Iruka was starting to understand, but didn't like where the facts were leading him. Kakashi continued to speak in his lecturing voice. That kind of devotion is Nukanen's is rare, so even if we had killed Naruto and taken Temari back to the sand, her and Gaara's influence could ruin relations between our villages. That would be bad enough, so I'm not going to mention what might happen if one of us had to tell Sabaku no Gaara his sister was defending Naruto from us. The commander was now feeling somewhat ashamed of his short-sightedness, but was still plenty annoyed as Kakashi went on. And then of course, he said, there's the fact that we got our butts so thoroughly kicked that Naruto would have escaped either way. Iruka-san, but I'm sure we could beat him if we used our resources better, even if Kyuubi is helping him. Kakashi nodded, maybe and maybe not. Naruto's speed and coordination have improved exponentially. I have no doubt that he would take at least a few of us down before he d. Either way, it's beside the point. We have no reason to go after him again, and honestly, none of us want to anyway. Iruka deflated, so what are we going to tell the Hokage then? Ibiki-san, we'll tell her the truth. Naruto has escaped but is not a threat to our village so long as we do not provoke him. Tsunade will like this better, so she won't argue. Iruka nodded, are we sure of that? He really isn't out for vengeance. Yes, Kakashi said, he threatened to attack Konoha, but only if we went after him first. We stay out of his way, and he and Temari stay out of ours. Iruka sunk a little lower and nodded in resignation, then I suppose that pretty much covers everything. Looking relatively disappointed, the brown-haired man turned and dismissed his team with a wave of his hand before walking off. Kakashi watched him for a moment then turned, Anko, follow him, now is the time for Iruka to hear what you have to say. She nodded, and rushed to follow the disappearing brown ponytail, the only sign of her injury being a slight limp. She made a mental note to get a really nice present for Shizune once they were back home. Anko finally caught up to Iruka when he was sitting at the base of a tree, holding his hunter mask up to the sun and looking at how the light shone through the eye slits. She sat next to him and watched silently for a moment, before interrupting his thoughts, so we can go home, tell Gaara his sister is fine and thereby prevent Konoha getting stomped. Everyone is still alive, yet our fearless leader is moping about something. Iruka glared, we come all the way out here, spending every ounce of time we have preparing and yet he paused for a moment, still haven't completed my mission. That, the brazen Junin replied, was not what you were going to say. And since you're too much of a baby to say it, I will for you. You put all this effort in and still, in the end, you didn't even get to see Naruto's face. Iruka set the mask down and rested his head back against the tree. I'm not sure whether I still love Naruto or hate him. We were always so similar, but now he goes and does something like this. Anko sighed, and of course, you start to remember when you considered running away from Konoha. He head snapped to the side, how do you know that? She stood on the other side of the tree, it's far more common than you might think, Iruka. Most shinobi consider leaving at one time or another, and when someone does, everyone else worries that someday his or her loyalty might wane. I, of course, being the prime example. Iruka had just a hint of curiosity on his face, so Anko continued. When Orochimaru first left, I was furious, but not because he had betrayed the village or because he had created some forbidden jutsus. I felt crushed that he hadn't taken me with him, all I cared about was the fact that he abandoned me. She paused for a moment, to let it sink in, then went on, it has been many years since he left, and even with him I feel no sense of closure. There is a part of me that always has and always will see Orochimaru as the man who used to carry me around Konoha on his shoulders, pointing out people and explaining how to learn things about them just by observing how they acted. I still use his advice today. So essentially, Iruka said dryly, what you're saying is that I'll be haunted by this for the rest of my life. Anko shook her head, nah, you'll probably be dark and depressed for a month or two, but things will soon get back to normal. Besides, you might even meet Naruto on amiable terms again someday. Iruka laughed slightly, you talk of him as if you still like him, even after he mangled your leg. She sighed again and rested a hand on Iruka's head, when you've ruined and killed as many people as I have, you'll understand that holding a grudge has never done anyone any good. Iruka just sat in contemplation as she got up and left, failing to hear her grumble under her breath, though I would like to see the brat try to fight me without his precious sword, stupid long weapons, it's like cheating. As she was just about to jump into the trees, Iruka got up. So, he asked, did any actual good come out of this? Anko forgot her grumbling and smiled, well, I will have a neat new battle scar, she winked at him, if you're lucky, I might show it to you someday. Iruka's mind took a few seconds to process the above statement. She had been see on her left side, from her inner thigh, up through her leg and halfway up her side. So showing him the scar would require her to remove almost all her clothes. He blushed. It has been said that there are times when people focus so much on a single goal, they forget about the big picture. Naruto lay on the ground, staring at the sky. They were less than a day from Hidden Cloud. He had absolutely no idea what he was going to do when he got there. So far, the best he had come up with was wandering around with a "will do B rank missions for food" sign, but figured that wouldn't go over too well with the local authorities. A short distance away, Temari sat examining the chessboard. Naruto had been telling the truth, she decided, the bastard fox was good. She was just about to move a piece when a repeat thumping sound distracted her. Naruto was beating his head against the ground in frustration, and failed to notice his audience. It wasn't until he heard laughing that he stopped and looked up. "Rather than amusing yourself at my expense, how about you try to come up with something yourself," he said, sounding only slightly annoyed. Temari snickered and went back to trying to take the QB's queen, who says we need to start doing missions right away. Temari said distractedly as she played, "Why not just start off doing some odd jobs and getting a feel for the town?" Naruto spent a moment just sitting there, trying to come up with a retort. He couldn't. After noticing his silence, Temari turned to look at him. "See. You just think too linearly." Realizing she was right, again, Naruto just flopped back down and stared up at the sky, mumbling about know-it-all Sandinins. Temari absent-mindedly picked up one of her training water balloons and threw it at him. The two arrived at the Hidden Cloud just as night was falling and the gate was being closed. As they had no passports and really weren't supposed to be there, they waited until the gate was fully shut and started walking around the outer perimeter of the wall. There were never enough guards to have a constant vigil all along the wall, so they moved in shifts. After half an hour of observation, Naruto and Temari waited for a patrol to pass and jumped over the wall, landing quietly on the other side. Upon the mutual decision that they didn't have money for a hotel, the first order of business was to find an area to sleep. Temari suggested they look for a training area within the city walls, as they would be generally deserted at night, and not 30 minutes later, they found just such a place. Spending only a moment to hide their bag in some brush, the two Nukanans found themselves with a whole village to explore. Naruto insisted that he needed new wrappings for his sword, and set off to find a fabric shop while Temari went to buy food. Naruto wandered through the crowds of people, holding his sword at his side and trying to make it as subtle as a 9-foot sword can be. It only took half an hour to get his wrappings and wrap up Sere Kirit, so Naruto amused himself by sitting on top of a building and examining his surroundings. As had been the case in Hidden Cloud looked like any other village. Various people, with or without forehead protectors, wandered by, going about their business. He just sat and watched for about 20 minutes, then realized he needed to get back, and bounced across the rooftops back to their designated sleeping area. Temari barely even twitched as Naruto dropped down next to her and grabbed up a cup of instant ramen. "Water?" he asked grumpily. Temari handed him a pot of warm water and he poured it over his ramen. She looked him over slowly for a moment. "What could have possibly happened in the last hour to annoy you so much?" Naruto poked at his still hard ramen. "I was just watching people." "Why is it," Temari said semi-rhetorically, "that the people blessed with the greatest power always envy those with no power whatsoever?" Naruto snorted. "Here's an imaginary situation for you. I'm in a bank when it is being robbed. I have to decide whether to use my great power or not, and my decision either way could cost people their lives. Robbers are evil by most people's definition, but so am I. Do I kill them? Do I help them? What should I do?" Despite the fact that it was just a hypothetical situation, Temari found herself trying hard to come up with an answer. He gave her a few seconds and observed her confusion. "Whoever it was," Naruto continued, "that said that responsibility comes with power wasn't referring to being spiritually bound to a demon, but the principle applies all the same. I didn't ask for my power, but when the pressure's on, I have to make a decision, hoping it's the right one." He paused for a moment, and looked off into space. "Then again, how do I even decide what right is?" That statement just hung in the air for a moment, then Temari shook her head slightly. "Okay, that's enough philosophy for now, my brain is hurting. I'll never understand how people like you and Gaara can just ponder these things all day long and still be sane." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Sane? It suddenly occurred to Temari that Gaara was best known for his random squishing of people and sand that was alive, while Naruto, on the other hand, was a perfect gentleman whenever he wasn't busy things, and had a talking sword that played a mean game of chess. Never mind, she muttered. Smirking, Naruto started to eat his semi-cooked ramen. Naruto and Temari slept side by side, as was their custom, so when Naruto was rudely awakened, he bumped into the sleepy sand girl beside him, and both of them immediately started to realize that the noise that had woken them was actually someone talking, just very loudly. What do we have here? A young couple, no doubt fleeing from oppression to elope together and live out the dreams. Ah, how I am inspired. Naruto closed his eyes, slowly counted to 5, and opened them again. The obnoxious man was still there. It seemed the fates truly hated him. Naruto smiled. Who are you, and why the hell are you waking me up this early? He and Temari had just gotten to sleep a couple of hours before and were looking forward to at least another 4 hours. The man said, am Cirrus, and you need to vacate our field, young man, so my glorious students may train their bee and mind so as to better burn with flaming passion. We must start before the sun rises so as to allow more time for our great pursuit. Temari was now also fully awake and noticed 3 children standing behind the man, all looking somewhat exasperated and embarrassed. Naruto just glared. It figured that every village had its weirdos, but why they always managed to congregate around him was a mystery. Fine, Naruto said as he climbed out of his bag and put on his vest, ignoring the blushing of various observers. He looked at Temari pointedly, but she shook her head. I don't care if this is their field, I'm not getting out of my bag with them watching. The 4 cloud nins, for it was obvious that was what they were, immediately jumped and turned, the 2 young girls still blushing from Naruto's brazen shirtlessness. Temari was struck by the surrealism as she rushed to change out of her nightshirt and into her regular clothes. Only with Naruto would she be dressing at 4 a.m. next to the turned backs of unknown shinobi. She was just glad she had removed her forehead protector before turning in. Once Temari was dressed, Naruto quickly packed their sleeping bags and everyone just stood awkwardly for a moment. Cirrus, however, soon banished the awkwardness with raw enthusiasm, as he grabbed his pupils and pulled them in front of him. Alas, I forget my manners. Students, how could we displace these people from their resting place without first introducing ourselves? All 3 sighed collectively, but the first girl stepped forward and suddenly exploded with enthusiasm. Nimbus, the silent rain. The second girl jumped up to join her, Ulu's, the lightning fist. The boy did a flip and landed between them, Stratus, shinobi of 1,000 faces. Naruto and Temari just held the gear and stared blankly, but it wasn't over yet. The annoying Junin suddenly appeared behind his students and thrust his finger into the sky. Cirrus, the human hurricane, and together we are. They all called in unison, Cloud Team 5, the storm of righteous fury. Naruto had seen many things in his life, but he was currently standing with his mouth agape, reconsidering whether he wanted to stay in Hidden Cloud. Once their intro was over, the 3 students sighed again and hung their heads as their teacher clapped happily. Well done, you 3. I expect that kind of performance in your training today as well. At this point, Temari had taken hold of Naruto's arm and the 2 were backing away slowly, when Cirrus suddenly spun back to them. You must not leave yet. In return for the use of our field, I ask nothing more than the stories of the many trials and tribulations that have brought 2 passionate young people such as yourselves to a place like this. Will you not stay? Naruto froze up for a minute. Temari was pulling on his arm, trying to drag him away, but he suddenly got an idea. A wonderful, amazing, dastardly idea. I would like nothing more, Naruto said with a grin, than to pass on my story so that it might inspire future generations. Temari looked at him as if he had grown another head, but Cirrus was practically beaming, and waved off his students while leading the 2 Nukanen over to a log and sitting down. Ulu's, Nimbus and Stratus started into some basic warm-up exercises while Naruto and Temari sat with Cirrus on the log. Well, Naruto started off thoughtfully, my tale begins many years ago, when my older brother murdered my entire family. Well, Naruto started off thoughtfully, my tale begins many years ago, when my older brother murdered my entire family. It just came out of the blue. One day we were a successful though small family of blacksmiths, and the next, everyone was dead. I managed to escape only because of pure luck. When he finally came for me, I grabbed an unfinished knife off the wall and tried to fend him off. He was very experienced, but B made his hands slippery and he lost his grip on his weapon for just a second. In that second, Naruto was pleased at the reaction he got. Sirius' eyes were wet and the man looked truly sad. Suddenly, he started openly sobbing and Naruto found himself engulfed in a crushing bear hug. To overcome such hardship must have required amazing strength. The boy wanted to respond, he really did, but an odd tingling sensation was running all throughout his body. He had also felt an odd tingling when Temari had hugged him, but that had been more of a warm tingle and this was more, circulation being see-off, tingle. He looked over Sirius' shoulder and glared at Temari, who was currently laughing silently at his predicament. Once the big man finally let go, Naruto made a mental note to lessen the angst from now on. He valued his skeletal structure. Sirius took a step back and rubbed his head bashfully. I must apologize, for I fear I was overcome by emotion. Naruto worked the kinks out of arms. No kidding, but if I can get back to my story. Sirius smiled innocently, by all means. Naruto took a moment to think. He had theorized that it would be difficult to make up a decent-sounding backstory on the fly, so he had decided that the most logical thing to do was combine the original material he had made up in the past with ideas from the histories of people he knew. He had always been told that the best lies were somehow based on truth. After that, I managed to somehow find my way to the nearby hidden village of Mist, where I worked for a barber who was an ex-nin and taught me some basic mist jutsus in his spare time. Naruto braced himself, making sure Sirius wasn't going to physically demonstrate his emotion again, and continued. Very little of interest happened in those years, and I left the barber shop at the age of 9 to look for work as a blacksmith's apprentice. I found a shop that would allow me to work in exchange for room and board, and spent the next year and a half working there. I would have been happy working there till I was 18, but fate intervened. It turned out that the blacksmith I was working for was loyal to a nin named Momoki Zabuza. Ever heard of him? Sirius nodded. Yes indeed, the devil of the hidden mist, failed a coup d'etat and fled the village with his followers, who I'm guessing included my master and I. That's right. Naruto finished. I somehow got dragged along and found myself being trained in various ninja arts, awaiting the day that the hunter nins would catch up to our group. I quickly decided I wanted nothing to do with a group of missing nins. Naruto almost grinned at the irony, and I ran away one night, slipping away in the dark. Sirius thrust his arm out and pumped it in the air. Such bravery. I find myself in awe of your burning passion for life. Quote. I tremble at the mere thought. A young man, desperately trying to escape a horrible situation, fighting valiantly for his freedom. Okay then, Naruto said, not quite sure how to respond to that. Anyway, I found myself an 11-year-old with a wide range of skills but no connections to anyone, so I just started to wander from town to town doing odd jobs. Most of the time, people took pity on me and paid a high price for me to just do basic tasks. Sirius nodded while stroking his chin. Ah yes, using one's youth and cuteness for monetary gain. Very clever. Naruto glared. Would you please stop interrupting me with your comments? Sirius stopped smiling. No, they're needed. Why? Because people who are lying tend to slip up when their story flow is disrupted. Temari started to get nervous as Naruto responded. What do you think I'm lying about? Sirius looked at him oddly. Actually, I'm not sure. Most of what you said had the feel of truth to it. Naruto mentally patted himself on the back. Then what makes you think I'm lying at all? While waiting for an answer, the boy ran through everything he had said, looking for a flaw, and realized it the same moment as Sirius spoke. You made the same mistake so many people in your situation make. It's a subconscious defense reaction that develops with all who are on the run. You're so willing to tell me what I want to know, but haven't told me your name yet. The tension hung in the air for a moment, as all three nins waited for something to happen. Naruto knew he had made a mistake and that his cover was at least semi-blown, but Sirius looked to be waiting for him to make the first move. Fushiku Naruto is my name, but I'm afraid I've given up all my cool les. Sirius nodded slowly. For some, a lure is something from which to draw strength, while for others it is a weight that drags you down a path you wish to avoid. He turned, and you would be. The sand girl was more abrupt. Temari. Silence reigned again for a moment, until Nimbus landed next to the group and immediately noticed the odd atmosphere. Is everything okay here? Sirius suddenly regained his energy and smiled brightly. Indeed, I was just enthralled by Naruto-kun's story. He has led a most amazing life. Nimbus looked to Naruto in curiosity. Is it okay if I listen? The Cloud Junin grinned brighter. That sounds like a most excellent idea. In fact, he turned to his other students. Stratus. ULUS. Take a break and come listen. You might learn something. His other slightly beat-up students landed among their little group, breathing heavily. Sirius gave Naruto a look. Continue on, Naruto-san, don't mind us. Naruto wasn't really sure what was going on, so he dove back into his story. During my travels, I found my way to Hidden Sand. -2 hours later, Sirius and Naruto sat under a tree at the edge of the training area while Temari and the Cloud Genin did some light taijutsu sparring. Naruto looked conflicted, and opened his mouth to speak when Sirius held up a hand. You know, kid, you tell really good stories. Even I stopped bothering to try deciphering the truth from what you made up. In fact, I really don't want to know the truth. You've shown no hostile intentions, and until that happens, I'll treat you the same as any other guest of the Hidden Cloud. Naruto looked down. Thank you. Sirius suddenly lost his air of seriousness. No need to thank me. I am a friend of all who burn with youthful exuberance. Gaara stood in on the hunter debriefing as the representative of Sand. Currently, Kakashi was reporting their actions right before Neji's confrontation of Naruto. And sir, the masked Junin glanced at Gaara, very gently knocked Temari unconscious, ran to the rendezvous, and passed her off to Shikamaru, who then used ropes to tie her. Kakashi suddenly paused and the whole room went silent as Shikamaru suddenly found himself engulfed in sand up to his neck. Gaara was completely calm as he spoke. Why have you stopped? Continue with your report. Kakashi coughed into his hand. Well, after very gently and carefully tying Temari up, Shikamaru stood guard. Unfortunately, due to certain oversights, she was able to escape unharmed by overpowering him. The masked Junin figured it was best to mention Temari's escape as soon as possible. Time passed as Kakashi gave his report until he reached the part about his and Temari's confrontation in the forest. At this point, Gaara's sand started to drift around the room, so Kakashi again rushed to the part where he was hit by the steam blast, and the sand quieted. Sitting on the sidelines, Iruka could see only too well the truth in what Kakashi had told him in the forest. Gaara was looking murderous enough at the thought of his sister being tied up. Fortunately, the rest of session was violence-free, as Iruka, Obiki and Anko gave their respective reports. The Hokage dismissed them, and they all filed outside. Shikamaru was the last out the door, and was about to head home and take a nap when he was suddenly engulfed in sand again. Naruto smirked slightly as Temari landed next to him. Sirius had taken her place in the quickly degenerating sparring session and was currently taunting Stratus to the point of insanity. The sand girl glared painfully at him. Damn it, it actually hurts to have to hold back this much. Naruto shrugged. A body trained to react instantly and with deadly precision is difficult to restrain. We train for hours every day to make ourselves as deadly as possible, so containing those combat instincts can be difficult. His voice suddenly became slightly strained, but it's kind of funny to watch them, isn't it? Temari looked up at the sky. Yeah. Naruto shifted closer and the two of them leaned gently against each other. How long ago was it? He asked as Sirius struck a pose while his students sighed. Or were we ever so innocent? Temari laughed, but her voice had a sad tone to it. We were, but that time seems now like it was a foolish daydream. Naruto nodded in silent acknowledgement. The two of them watched as Nimbus and Ulu snuck behind Stratus and jumped him, grappling him to ground and tying him up with twine. The two girls mercilessly tickled the restrained boy, only to scream when Sirius tackled them from behind, forming an odd dog pile of laughing forms. Why? She asked suddenly, do you put so much trust in Sirius? We don't even know anything about him. Naruto thought carefully, that man knows what it truly is to be a shinobi, and yet he continues to be one. He understands how difficult life can be. Stratus managed to escape his bonds and crawled out from the pile to dive on top of it. How do you know all this? Temari asked. Something changes in a person when they've been subjected to too much pain and loneliness, and it's obvious for those of us who know what we're looking for. At that moment, his voice sounded so sad that it struck Temari on some deep level. Unable to think of anything else to say, she reached an arm over Naruto's shoulder, pulled him just a little closer, and felt him hesitantly reach around her waist a moment later. The two of them just sat and watched the Cloud Nins at play, as they held each other in a semi-hug. Shikamaru was in darkness for some time, but was patient. Eventually, the sand on his head retracted and he found himself in a small room facing Gaara, Kankuro and Baki. The shadow user had known something like this would happen to at least one member of the team, but he had been hoping it wouldn't be him. It was common practice in situations like this for any secondary group with an interest in the mission, in this case, the sand, to conduct their own unofficial debriefing. Shikamaru looked at the three people before him. Gaara growled, "You will tell me everything that happened in your own words. I want to know every detail of what you observed about my sister." Shikamaru just sighed. It was going to be a long night. 1 month later, as evening fell, Temari stood the training field, surrounded by various clones. Ulus and Stratus used the regular variety, whereas Nimbus favored water clones. She knew that somewhere in the crowd of clones were the real people, but finding them would be a chore. What she was currently doing was what Cirrus called teamwork exercises. What that meant was that Stratus, Ulus and Nimbus had to, using any means possible, try to overcome either Naruto or Temari, who were both restricted to taijutsu. So far, the Cloud Genin had lost a consecutive 59 times. Currently, for their 60th try, Temari was noticing a distinct use of Naruto-esque tactics. Unfortunately, the make a million clones and attack blindly strategy wasn't working any better for them than it had for Naruto. The spar had been going on for 6 minutes now and Temari had destroyed almost 2/3 of clones and didn't even have a scratch on her. Though still hidden, the three attackers knew this fight would be over shortly and collectively grumbled. Every time a match ended, the defender would change, and that meant Naruto was up next. Now and then, the Genin would hit upon a good plan and had almost gotten Temari once or twice, but for all their attempts, they hadn't even landed a hit on the Fox Boy. Naruto and Temari only ever spent half the day with Cirrus and his team. The rest of the time they spent either entertaining themselves or practicing with their respective weapons and testing out higher-level jutsus in the wilderness right outside Hidden Cloud. They were living pretty boring lives and hadn't taken on any real missions yet, but they were both content. After their first day, the two had quickly become unofficial additions to the storm of righteous fury. Nowhere were they registered, but their help allowed Team 5 to complete more tasks in a day, more dogs walked and more weeds pulled than any other Genin team, and in return, the two Nukanons got some money and were allowed to sleep in the training field. Naruto stood off to one side, waiting for his turn to try. He watched amusedly as another 6 clones were taken out by a spinning kick on Temari's part. He hadn't told her yet, but he knew it would soon be time to leave. He had seen the signs. Some of the other Cloud Junin were getting suspicious. He didn't feel particularly sad about leaving. The Genin viewed him more as a superior than a companion, despite their similar ages, and he hadn't really had much contact with anyone outside the team. In fact, Cirrus was the only one Naruto really thought he would miss. Naruto and Cirrus had formed a somewhat odd relationship over the course of the various interactions and they shared a rare understanding. Most of their communication was done without words, as both were much more withdrawn when not in a group of people. Temari had one night seen him laying in the field staring at the stars, and had come back 4 hours later to see that neither had moved. They weren't speaking, and yet, Temari had felt that had she said anything, she would have been interrupting. Naruto could truly say that he saw the slightly odd man as a friend, though their friendship had developed in a rather bizarre way. Flashback. It was the 7th day after Cirrus first found them lying in his training field, and after a particularly long day of training, the Junin had offered to take the two of them out to dinner, as they really didn't have any money left. Naruto instantly suggested ramen, which was received with annoyance and bemusement by Temari and Cirrus respectively, but Naruto eventually convinced the Sand Girl, so they found themselves at an all-you-can-eat ramen stand. Temari quickly finished her one bowl of ramen, and declared she was going back to polish her fan, leaving Naruto and Cirrus happily inhaling their noodles. After 11 bowls, Naruto patted his belly and turned to his companion. "I have to say I'm curious about something." "Really? What?" was what Cirrus meant to say, but since his mouth was full it came out more like, "YWFWA." Naruto rested his elbow on the counter and leaned on his hand, Why are you helping us? Cirrus swallowed. Why wouldn't I? The Junin tensed as Naruto's eyes narrowed. If it were just me, I would be fine with us both playing fools, but I have someone else to look out for, and you know perfectly well that we're not supposed to be in this village. I've been as straight with you as I can be, so I want the same from you. Cirrus leaned back on his stool, so only 2 legs touched the ground. I suppose that's fair, but the answer is simple. I envy your conviction. Naruto was mildly surprised, but he didn't show it. Elaborate. Cirrus gestured to the owner to get him another bowl. When one was 16, I was still a genin, and had been dating one of my teammates for a year and a half. I supposed what we had might have one day led to something more, since I always wanted kids, but we were one day assigned what was supposed to be a simple mission, just hunting down some highway robbers, but they had a few Chunin-level nins among them. The old man returned with the ramen, and Cirrus asked for a beer before returning to his story. It really shouldn't really have been a big deal. Our teacher, Sumharato, was a Junin, so logically, we should have one without much trouble. Cirrus stopped talking, and looked lost in the past, so Naruto decided to prod him forward slightly. And what happened during the battle? Cirrus leaned back a bit further, balancing and putting his legs up on the counter. There was no battle. Within seconds of our ambush, my 2 teammates were down with minor wounds. Not expecting such a fast response, and now missing most of his, Cirrus spoke bitterly. Meat shield. Our Junin instructor turned and ran. He pulled up his left sleeve, revealing that most of the skin was discolored scar tissue. With the major threat gone, we stood no chance. My teammates helpless, on the ground, and I escaped by using my arm to shield myself from the rain of K that followed me. I was hit 27 times, and almost lost my arm. His beer arrived, and he grabbed a paper cup and poured some into it. I arrived at headquarters after being released from the hospital to check on the mission report. All it said was, mission failed, 2 casualties. Those words were the sum total of how much the village valued the lives of my friend and love. Sum wasn't even reprimanded. He passed the paper cup of beer to Naruto, who looked at it curiously. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to run as far as I could from Hidden Cloud and all it represented, but I never worked up the nerve. All I have been able to do is make sure that at least one genin team has a teacher who will never abandon them. Naruto sat quietly for a moment, but that's a lot better than nothing, isn't it? Cirrus smiled slightly and held up his bottle, to the burning passion of youth. Naruto's raised his paper cup, to the burning passion of youth. End flashback. Cirrus had been a bit more withdrawn for a couple of days, and his students had inquired about his health when he had kept his voice at normal volume and only made them run through their introductory pose sequence 3 times one morning, instead of the usual 10. After that, Naruto had started to treat Cirrus with more respect, even when the man was leaping through the air yelling about energy and spirit. Naruto looked up to see that Temari was just finishing off the clones, revealing 3 wiped out genin. She hadn't even broken a sweat. She wandered over to what had become the 2 sitting spot. Your turn. He shook his head. We're done for the day, we have things we need to do. Temari shrugged. Okay, so what are the things we need to do? We need to get out of here tonight. There have been too many people inquiring about our presence. She shook her head. And whose fault is that, exactly? Flashback. 3 weeks after their arrival, the 3 again found themselves going out to eat. Refusing ramen, they were eating in a rather typical bar and grill type of place. For the first few minutes, everything had been fine, but then Naruto started to notice things. There were a number of nins eating, and many of them were whispering and pointing in Cirrus' direction. A few of them started laughing and pretended to strike poses. Naruto was just about to say something, when a group approached their table. The middle one, obviously the leader, spoke first. Eating with mercenaries, Cirrus. I never thought even you would sink this low. A large number of nins looked down on people without ninja training who fought for money. Without forehead protectors, and with Naruto carrying around a sword as big as his, a weapon no normal shinobi would use, most would assume they were mercenaries. Naruto stood up and glared. I don't care for money. The nin smirked arrogantly at him. Oh. How do you decide who to K then? It was here that Naruto made his fatal mistake. In his anger, he let some of his chakra seep out as he bared his fangs. Whomever I want. The group offending nins suddenly started to look extremely nervous and backed off. but Sirius grabbed his arm and dragged him out of the restaurant, Temari following. Once they were outside, Sirius sighed, "That was very stupid, Naruto." Naruto, of course, knew this already, and was hanging his head. He had a feeling this was going to come back and haunt him later. End flashback. From that day on, people had started to glance in his direction whenever he walked by, and he had heard a few of the rumors. They were all crap, but people soon started to take an interest in him. So now they had to leave. Naruto and Temari started to pack up the few things they had as Stratus, Ulus and Nimbus stretched in the field. Noticing something was amiss from his vantage point, Sirius landed next to them. "Isn't it your turn to defend, Naruto-kun?" The boy shook his head. "I'm afraid we need to get ready, we're going to be leaving tonight." Sirius looked sad, but not surprised. "Ah yes, I feared this day would come soon." Temari called over to the genin in the field, "Hey, you guys. Come over here for a second." After everyone was made aware of the departure, things were packed up, and Sirius gave everyone bear hugs, even his students. Just for the heck of it, Naruto and Temari left the field that had been their home for a month, and headed for the wall. Naruto looked upset as they approached the barrier, and veered off at the last minute. The girl looked at him oddly as he went into a convenience store and started looking through a phone book. Slash dash 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 slash dash. Stratus was awakened the next morning by a knocking on his door, and was surprised to find a member of the village police on the other side. "Excuse me," the man said, "all the shinobi in the village are gathering, there's been an incident." When Stratus arrived at the base of the tower, he looked around in awe. He had never seen this many shinobi in one place before. The Raikage emerged from the tower and looked over the group assembled before him. "This morning, a mailman found one of our shinobi murdered in his bed." A gasp went through the crowd. His name was Sumharato, a Junin. "I want you all to go about your normal business, but rest assured that matter will be fully investigated. That is all." Stratus rushed to the training field, where his teammates were waiting for him. The three started to excitedly talk about the Raikage's announcement, waiting for their teacher to arrive. Slash dash 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 slash dash. Temari watched Naruto as they walked. Her eyes flickered towards the bee on his sword wrappings. Did he deserve that? Naruto looked back at her. Yes. She tilted her head sideways and looked at him searchingly, then nodded. Slash dash 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 slash dash. Sirius was sitting at the ramen stand in the exact same seat he had sat in 3 weeks before, staring at the open but untouched bottle of beer in front of him. He couldn't describe how he felt right then. It was a combination of so many emotions. Sirius had access to information that was normally restricted. Sumharato hadn't just been K, he had been C cleanly in half. Everything Sirius had experienced flashed through his mind in an instant, the most vivid image being that of his teammates, lying abandoned as they were set upon from all sides. The voice of the only girl he had ever loved, screaming her last. Tears ran down his face as he raised his bottle in a silent toast, and took one swig. He set the rest on the counter with some money, and wiped his face on his sleeve. It was time to meet his students. Slash dash 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 slash dash. His ears ringing, an almost awake Naruto swiped at the alarm clock next to his bed. It took him a moment to remember where he was, and he stretched as he sifted through recent memories. They had left Hidden Cloud 2 days ago, and were currently in a small town, only a day's travel from Oceanside, the next city they planned to visit. From the looks of the room, Temari had already left, probably to see the musicians. Their current location was named Snokken, which Naruto felt was a very odd name, but Snokken was renowned for its street performers. He grabbed his bag and headed out the door of their room, intent on seeking his companion. The streets seemed oddly empty as he wandered, and Naruto started to get suspicious. He passed 1 or 2 small musicians, but nothing of interest, and no people. He finally asked someone what was going on, and an old man directed him to stage 6. Once he arrived, He realized that luckily, it wasn't going to be very difficult to find Temari, as everyone in the town seemed to be gathered in one place. All the girls, at least. On one of the larger stages that were scattered about the streets, two performers were playing to a crowd of love-struck fans and the jealous boyfriends, who liked the music anyway. The lead attraction was a dark-haired guitarist, who played so fast, even someone of Naruto's reflexes was impressed. His instrument seemed like it was going to burst into flame as his hands danced over the strings. Behind him was a larger man who was beating out a steady tempo on a large African drum. Naruto sighed as he noticed that Temari was just as enraptured as the rest of them, gazing up at the stage, and he took a moment to more closely examine the two performers, as something about them didn't feel quite right. The drummer suddenly grinned at him in a distinctly shark-like way, and Naruto's eyes widened. It took only a minute for the song to finish, so Naruto had to think on his feet. He pushed his way to the front of the crowd, turned his back to the stage, crossed his arms, and activated a few fear stimuli. I'm sorry folks, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the show is over for now. A collective groan came from the crowd, which started to dissipate, and Temari looked both annoyed and confused. Naruto jumped on stage and grabbed the guitarist's shoulder. What the hell are you two doing here, Itachi? The Uchiha activated his Sharingan for a moment. Various things, Naruto-kun, but primarily looking for you. The boy looked confused. Why? Kisame leaned over from his position at his drum. We'll talk somewhere more private. Naruto just grabbed his head. Okay, you guys grab your stuff and I'll take you back to our room. Both Kisame and Itachi raised simultaneous eyebrows and spoke in tandem. You did say our room, didn't you? He glanced at Temari, who was still on the ground in front of the stage and looking even more confused. The Akatsuki followed his gaze, and Kisame grinned. Already got a girl. You work fast, don't you, brat? Naruto tightened his grip on his head, grabbed the instruments, explaining will be done later. He turned to Temari, who looked about to speak. That applies to you too. All will become clear once we get out of the freaking street. I hope. The genjutsu-ed forms of Itachi and Kisame grabbed their instruments and followed Naruto back to the hotel. Once they were all standing in the room, the Akatsuki dropped their illusion, and Temari gasped slightly at Kisame's appearance. The drum puffed away to reveal Samehada, but Itachi's guitar seemed real. Naruto sat on the bed. Okay, first things first. Temari, this is Hoshigaki Kisame, and that's Uchiha Itachi, who are about to explain why they're stalking me and playing music for donations. Naruto actually wasn't sure which of those two things he found weirder. Itachi just leaned against the wall and pulled a stick of Pocky out of his pocket, giving Kisame a look that obviously meant that the shark man would be doing the explaining. Kisame sighed. We tracked you down pretty easily, as there aren't many places you can go from Hidden Cloud. As to why we're looking for you, we were traveling this way anyway, and have been given a mission offer that might interest you. Kisame gave Temari an appraising look. And your friend. That made sense, so Naruto nodded. Okay, but I'm still not getting the part where two S-class Nukanans are playing music in the street. The shark man sighed yet again. We were given a mission allowance, but we were dropping Kiran off in a village up north, and there just happened to be a Pocky factory there, and coincidentally, it was Pocky Appreciation Week, and through mysterious circumstances, Itachi somehow managed to lose our money bag and was given a few hundred free boxes of Pocky. Still leaning against the wall, Itachi smiled to himself, and, of course, chicks dig guys who can play guitar. Naruto had hung his head about halfway through Kisame's explanation, so the two most deadly men on the planet are broke because Itachi has no self-control. Itachi glared. I do too. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Really? Kisame said a few hundred boxes of Pocky. Itachi's eyebrow rose to meet Naruto's, getting a bit mouthy. Aren't we, brat? Unnoticed, Temari had been backing towards the door throughout their banter, and as Naruto and Itachi exchanged smirks, she turned and quickly went out. The other members of the room only noticed when they heard the door S. Everyone else stood frozen for a moment, then Naruto went to follow her. As the door S a second time, Kisame went for the remote from its perch on a side table and flicked on the TV. Itachi grabbed another stick of chocolatey goodness and looked up at his partner. That could have gone better. Slash dash 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 slash. Naruto looked both ways in the hallway, and saw the door to the stairwell at his left closing. He ran, and reached the door in 4 steps, pulling it open. He heard a sound above him, and started to climb the winding stairs. He didn't rush, but moved methodically. He had gone up 4 floors when he heard the door to the roof. Just moments later, he was facing that same door, and he opened it slowly, not wanting to startle the apparently bothered girl. He stepped onto the roof and winced slightly as the sun hit his eyes. Temari was standing with her back to him, not appearing to be paying attention to much of anything. When she spoke, it was in an odd tone of voice. It's funny. I have actually heard of Hoshigaki Kisame. He came most of Water Country's generals and lords, 39 people in all. He also came most of the guards and attendants, another 127 people. Naruto was feeling an odd churning in his stomach as Temari slowly turned to face him. He is a person of very rare variety. He scares me. Temari's voice rose a notch, and do you know what? The other one seems even more frightening. I was shaking. Me. The sister of Sabaku no Gara is afraid of a little girly man with a ponytail. She finally got fully turned around so she was facing him. Those two are real S-class criminals, Naruto, and they're really dangerous. Naruto suddenly started get annoyed. Even after all their time together, she still didn't understand. We are all Nukanen, and we do what we have to. Kisame and Itachi have just had more difficult lives than we have. So they have had to kill more people. Temari struggled with this for a moment, so, that makes their okay. Naruto half sighed half growled, sometimes, yes. I didn't see you having moral qualms about that leaf hunter who went after you. Temari glared, but those two just because it's convenient, they're monsters. The sore spot had been struck. Naruto suddenly took a step towards her. Like me, you mean? You think I'm a monster? Temari shook her head, but you're not normally like that. You only hurt people when. Naruto's red chakra started to pulse around him as he took another step forward. When I need to. When people get in my way. Do you see a difference between what I do and what those two Akatsuki do? She lost a bit of her conviction. Yes. Suddenly, the chakra started to pulse more strongly, and Temari could feel the charge in the air as the red and blue energy surrounded Naruto. He had held eye contact throughout their conversation, and his pupils suddenly contracted, narrowing into slits. Temari found herself fighting the urge to take a step back as he again moved slightly closer, his eyes burning into her, as if they could see into her soul. He took another step closer. Then another. There was now only a couple feet separating them, and Naruto's chakra exploded outward. Slash dash 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 slash. Two heads snapped upwards, and Kisame muted, fear factor. Itachi sucked in a breath. What are they doing up there? His blue-skinned partner shook his head. I have no idea, but the brat sure is impressive. I have been thinking recently that his may be even bigger than yours, Itachi. Itachi looked at him. Why would you be thinking about that? Wait. His is not bigger than mine. Kisame shrugged. I really don't know Itachi. I know you pretty well, and have seen you at work, but this kid just blows me away. The Uchiha was starting to get annoyed. Kisame, I'll have you know that you have never seen me, at work, and even assuming you had, it's how you use it that's important. Kisame thought for a moment. What about that girl in Hidden Rain? She did a number on you. Your control was pathetic. Itachi looked about to seizure. How do you know about that? Kisame looked at his partner oddly. I was there, remember? You, what? Kisame nodded. Since your memory appears to be shot, I took over after you fell unconscious. After just 3 rounds. Itachi was confused and horrified at the same time. He didn't remember anything like that. Kisame continued, and plus, Naruto has been getting a lot of practice recently. How do you mean? Well, he has been traveling with that sand girl for some time now, and I'd guess they have 1 or 2 hours a day to spare. Add that up and you get a whole lot of time. Itachi was almost hysterical. Kisame, they're just kids still. How could they have 1 hour or 2 a day for that? Kisame was starting to get nervous about his partner's mental health. We both used to train for 8 hours a day, and we weren't much older than him, Itachi. We knew Naruto's chakra reserves would grow larger than ours, and I know your chakra control is almost perfect, so there's no need to get so touchy about it. I was just joking, sheesh. Everything in Itachi's mind suddenly clicked into place. We were talking about chakra size. His partner stared at him. What did you think we were talking about, Itachi? Itachi was silent, and a look of understanding suddenly passed over Kisam's face. The shark man burst out laughing. Itachi clenched his fists. Damn it. It's not funny, Kisam. Fine then, laugh away, I'm going to go see what's going on. Kisam followed, still snickering. Well, I now know why you got your ass kicked in that fight with that Rain Junin last year. TSK, Itachi, picking up chicks before missions is not a good thing. Itachi swore at him from the hallway. Slash dash 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 slash. Temari found herself in a maelstrom, her senses overwhelmed completely by such huge amounts of chakra, and her skin burned from the heat. She felt like she was standing inside a hurricane, yet wasn't being lifted off. But through it all, she could still see those burning red eyes. Naruto took a final step closer, leaving only inches between them. His fangs had grown longer and his face markings darker. When he reached a hand up and grabbed her shoulder, she could feel claws. How about now, Temari-san? Do you think I'm a monster now? Temari opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. The figure in front of her was reminiscent of uncountable similar experiences with her brother. Every time Gaara had lost control, she had run as fast and far as she could. But there was somewhere a part of her that wouldn't let her do it, and that same part of her was saying something that was very difficult to hear, but if she listened hard enough. Naruto almost jumped when Temari suddenly reached up and grabbed hold of his arm and pulled him closer. The fox boy felt his menace draining away as her eyes lost their fear, and stared defiantly back into his. When she spoke, it was just above a whisper. You try to drive me away, but why? Why do you react in anger? Temari went on, thinking aloud, you're trying to protect yourself. You're afraid I might hurt you, so you withdraw, hiding behind your facade. I spent my whole life dealing with a person who did the same thing, and every time he put of his defenses, I ran away. Naruto opened his mouth, but found himself incapable of speech as Temari slowly leaned her body onto his, still whispering, but now I'm stronger, and there's a flaw in your defense. If someone has enough courage, they can exploit it. The fox boy's mouth was dry, but he forced words out, and what is that? Your defenses won't force me away if I can get close enough to you. She took a deep breath, then pulled his body fully up against hers and kissed him. Naruto was frozen for a moment, but slowly felt that familiar and pleasant tingling run through his body. He relaxed and reached one arm round the small of her back. Over at the still open door to the roof, two figures stood watching. Kisam looked down at Itachi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but are those two making out in the eye of a chakra storm? Itachi said in acknowledgement. How long do figure it'll be before Naruto drops from chakra depletion? Itachi pulled out his watch. I'd say about 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, now. Temari gasped as Naruto suddenly went limp and the chakra around them dissipated. She quickly laid him out on the roof and put her head to his chest, and was relieved to hear slow steady breathing. She sat up and felt a presence beside her. Kisam crouched down and hoisted Naruto over his shoulder. Well, it appears our little friend was too distracted. Temari blushed, and wasn't paying attention to his chakra reserves. It's not too bad, though, so he should be up after a night's sleep. The shark man stood up, and started to head for the stairs. Itachi just stood in the middle of the roof, and watched as Temari stared up at the sky. After a few minuets, she slowly walked over to him. You, she said, have a lot of people. Itachi nodded. Temari looked down at her feet. I want you to tell me why. I want to know why you people. Itachi's expression didn't change. Why do you wish to know? Because I am a missing nin, but I don't understand you people yet. Temari looked to Naruto's unconscious form, held by Kisam like a sack of potatoes. I don't understand yet, but I want to. Slash dash 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 slash. The Dark Avenger stood atop a building, his various minions surrounding him. In his right hand he clutched a newspaper, and he seemed relatively lost in thought. His foremost minion stepped forward, the sound forehead protector he wore glinting in the light. So, what are we going to do? The Avenger let his gaze sweep over the pitiful remains of a once great military. We have no choice. I will not allow the last of Orochimaru-sama's legacy to be destroyed by Konoha-s. The assembled shinobi nodded, and collectively vanished, the only trace that anyone had been there being the newspaper that slowly drifted to the ground. A gust of wind blew over the building, causing the paper to unroll, revealing the headline. Uchiha Sasuke imminent. Slash dash 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 slash. The next day, Naruto lay in bed, happily eating warm ramen, when he heard arguing outside the room. Itachi burst into the room, followed by his partner. Kisame was looking very conflicted. Itachi, you can't just pull S like this. What is the council going to say? Itachi stopped. Screw the council. Screw our mission. You can tell those old bums whatever you want. I have to do this. Naruto looked from one to the other, noodles still hanging from his mouth. What's happened? Slash dash 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 slash. Temari returned to the hotel just in time to hear Naruto bellow, "What? You're kidding." She rushed into the room, and found everyone else sitting around the small round side table. Itachi was speaking, "I'm quite serious. I didn't spare my little brother all those times just to watch him get K for coming after me." Both Kisame and Naruto were looking at him incredulously, their hands simultaneously tapping on the hilts of their swords of nervous habit. Itachi just glared at him. "Why do you two care so much, anyway?" They both looked at him as if he were dumb. "We're going with you." The Uchiha blinked, started to shake his head, when Naruto said, "Now, either we can have a long painful argument, ending with you agreeing to our coming along, or you could just say, yes, now." Itachi sighed, "Fine." Temari started waving her hands in the air. What are we doing?" Naruto looked up at her. "We're doing exactly what I was hoping to never do again. We're going back to Konoha, to stop the bastard from getting himself K." She turned to Kisame. Translation. He hefted Samehada, Uchiha Sasuke has been captured and is headed for E. It looks like we're going to save him. Temari looked skeptical. "We are going to take on a whole village of people to save one person. 4 of us." All 3 S-class Nukanons stared, and Naruto nodded. "Well, yeah, is there a problem with that?" She looked at the faces around her and sighed. "You males are all freaks. I suppose now we need to start getting ready. Can you two get all your stuff in less than 30 minutes? The two Akatsuki nodded and left the room, Itachi grabbing his guitar as he went out the door. Once they were alone, Temari flopped down on the bed next to Naruto, and leaned up against him, allowing him the space to slide an arm around her waist. They hadn't spoken since the day before, but there was only the slightest bit of awkwardness between them. Naruto needed to break the ice somehow, so naturally, he just went for the first thing that popped into his head. "You seem to be getting along with Itachi and Kisame today. What brought on this change?" Temari was only slightly annoyed at his choice of topic, but just shook her head. "We were up late last night talking. We played the question game." "The question game?" "Yeah. All 3 of us sat in a circle and took turns asking someone else a question which they have to answer. It really helped me get used to them, and they're kind of amusing in their own way." Mildly entertained at the thought of Kisame and Itachi playing slumber party games, Naruto grinned and laid his head back on the pillow. "Actually," Temari said, "the game might have gone on longer, but Itachi and Kisame got into a little spat." Naruto grinned wider. "Do tell." Well, it was Kisame's turn to ask, and he suddenly got a sneaky look on his face. "I don't remember exactly, but his question had something to do with you and Wang's size. Itachi almost K him." Naruto laughed for a minute, and then fell slowly quiet, so the two of them lay in silence, content to just hold each other. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.